Absolutely. And I think you're about to hit on a point that it was another question I had, and I was thinking, Professor Lee, I know you've done a lot of discussion about this in the past. Has the way we view or calculate PUE changed over the last few years? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Professor Lee, because I know we've talked about that previously.
Yeah. So I think the conventional definition of PUE still stands, right? So it's basically like IT plus facilities or over IT. But I think we have to recognize that this is essentially a ratio that describes how efficiently a data center uses energy relatively. So I want to focus on this relatively, right? So basically how much energy is actually used by the computing equipment relative to cooling and other overhead. So I think this ratio does not fully reflect, for example, the coupling between power and cooling, which I spoke about that just now. So to just give examples, I think last year we actually completed a project whereby we actually demonstrated the rack of liquid cooled server hardware, right? And interestingly, by operating very high performance liquid cooling, so we have demonstrated you are able to actually reduce the server power consumption by as much as 40 to 50%. But then if you actually make use of the convention definition of PUE, imagine, right? So if your IT actually reduces by 50%, both in your numerator and denominator, in fact, your PUE will increase. So if we go with the conventional thinking, right, this is in fact less efficient. No, it's true, it's less efficient relatively. But if you look at the total power consumption, right, for the whole data center, or in my case, the entire rack, is actually highly desirable because the total power consumption actually reduces, right? But then making use of the conventional PUE definition is not able to fully capture the effect of actually the lowering the total power consumption. So that's why I thought actually PUE is certainly useful, right? But at the same time, it shouldn't be the singular indicator. It should be part of a bigger matrix, right? So that we can holistically assess efficiency, total power consumption, CO2 emission. Yeah, so I think there's probably a need to sort of relook or figure out, so what should be this greater matrix, right, of which PUE will be one of the indicators. Yeah, so as to allow us to holistically assess for example, the contribution by the operating or even designing of a more efficient cooling system.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense, right? If we're doing things so much more differently and doing a holistic assessment of everything in the data center, then one number isn't going to reflect that, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, PUE has been good from the point of view it's actually made people realize what's going on in the data center. But I totally agree with Professor Lee that it is certainly not the best metric out there that could be used. But at least it gave people a starting point to see what's going on. We've been working with the Canadian Standards Association here in Canada on a new concept. It's not published yet as such, but it's referred to as the benchmark energy factor for data centers. And the objective of that is to take into account both the IT side, the cooling side, and the what are called the auxiliary side, or the other side, the lights and all that good stuff type of thing, power distribution losses, etc. And it'll be published hopefully published as a standard in September so timeframe, maybe earlier this year. But the intent of it is to take into account the fact that if you are virtualizing, that's a benefit, but also the amount of work that's being done by servers. So essentially what it looks at is what's referred to as an ideal level of energy, and it's basically saying that's, in a perfect world, that's where you would be able to operate, but nobody will ever get to that perfect world as such. So where are you today relative to the amount of work your servers are doing, the types of cooling systems you're using, and your things like your lighting systems, your power distribution losses, etc. And then what could you do to improve that, and how close would that get you to that ideal world at once? So They're doing some testing with it now. As I say, it's been a work in progress for the last 3 or 4 years. I don't want to say it's not it's another method of calculating really where you are in the data center, but I think it does take a more holistic view than PUE, because I mean, you go in and do a massive amount of virtualization and of servers in a data center, and you've done wonderful. You've reduced energy, but your PUE's gotten a whole lot worse because if you haven't done anything with cooling or with any other structures in there. So people look at that and say, well, that was pretty stupid. Why'd you do all of that? You made my PUE worse. Well, I did the right thing. Just the calculation not in my favor.
That makes sense. Well, that's exciting. I mean, that's something to look forward to in September and find out what comes out and how we can utilize it.
Yeah, we're planning on doing a webinar probably in September timeframe on that in conjunction with CSA to expose that to people to see what their views are on it. But I think it's a pretty good system from what I've seen. Yeah, pretty good metric.
Fantastic. No, that's exciting. It's very exciting.